With regard to ordinals and inscriptions, I think people are starting to ask the question, in addition to moving money on the network, what else can I do on a crypto network if what I wanted was to burn a transaction that is immutable, share it on a ledger to the entire world, and know that it will last forever. And as long as the people that hold it are adamantly against anybody else controlling it, then I think you cement its commodity status. And if there's any one crypto asset that has that conservative community view that it should not be changed, it's Bitcoin. Gold is now the glass money or the shell beads money or the stone coin money. It's just the gold bugs haven't quite got it through their head that it's antiquated, shiny rocks. Bitcoin is a commodity. It is not a security. And so that's why, for example, probably doesn't make sense for us to buy $1 billion of Grayscale, right? Because you're correct. If our public company investors can hold securities, they have a charter to hold securities, and they ideally want securities that trade on the NASDAQ, operating company securities. But let's make the point here. Most people misunderstand Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a commodity. So if you had a publicly traded company that owned a portfolio of $4 billion worth of buildings, or $4 billion worth of timberland, or $4 billion worth of natural gas rights, or $4 billion worth of oil fields, right? $4 billion worth of warehouses, that actually is a very legitimate mission and a very legitimate charter or strategy for a publicly traded company, because the average investor doesn't want to acquire warehouses or millions of acres of mineral rights, right? They can't do that. They want to buy the security. So we are a security, but we're backed by a commodity. So that's the first observation that is the reason why this is not the case. Hey, if I was running a REIT and I owned a bunch of apartment buildings in Miami Beach, and you said to me, hey, why don't you just let the public company investors invest in their own apartment buildings in Miami Beach? I mean, the answer is they don't want to go and run apartment buildings in Miami Beach. It's a pain in the ass, and they don't know which ones to own, and they're worried about, the inspections, the insurance, the taxes. The legal sophisticated opinion 3 years ago was Bitcoin is the obvious commodity. Everything else is a question mark. What's happened since then in the next 34 months or such since we started this journey is consensus has formed that indeed is the case. So since we made that determination with our attorneys, we've had Janet Yellen endorse Bitcoin as an innovation. We've had Christina Lagarde say it's an asset. We've had Jerome Powell say it's an asset. We've had Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC, in multiple congressional testimonies and documents and interviews assert it is a commodity. We've had the head of the CFTC assert it's a commodity. If anything, Bitcoin's status as a commodity is much more certain today than it was 36 months ago. The real key here, David, to being a commodity is for no one to control it and no one have the power to change it. So as long as Bitcoin is so decentralized that no one can change it, and as long as the people that hold it are adamantly against anybody else controlling it, then I think you cement its commodity status. And if there's any one crypto asset that has that conservative community view that it should not be changed, it's Bitcoin. So it is the most secure asset in the crypto universe with regard to its legal status. So Bitcoin is not 1%, it's 0.1%. So Bitcoin can increase by a factor of 10, and it's going to be a 1%er, and it can increase by a factor of 100. And by that time, there'll be a lot more of the other stuff. And so when Bitcoin goes up by a factor of 100, it'll probably be a 3-4% of the entire financial universe. The bad money that's get crowded out, David, to be clear, bonds, That's why they're crashing. Silver, that's why it's down 9% in 3 years. Gold is now the glass money or the shell beads money or the stone coin money. It's just the gold bugs haven't quite got it through their head that it's antiquated, shiny rocks. All these things that are underperforming Bitcoin, they're the bad money. In addition, look at the peso. The peso used to trade 1 peso to the dollar. And today the peso is like 480 pesos to the dollar. So in 20 years, the peso has lost 99.8% of its value in Argentina. But in the past 12 months, it's collapsed by a factor of 2. And just last week, the Argentine central bank closed the doors and they said, you can no longer convert your pesos into Bitcoin on an exchange, because they realized, according to Gresham's law, that people are going to be trading their pesos to Bitcoin as fast as they can. You see this going on with the Naira. You see that going on all through Africa. You'll see it going on everywhere in the world. What's going to happen is a stampede from weak monies, but there's so many of them, right? I mean, bad stocks, bad commodities, overvalued fiat currencies. People are going to stampede from those to strong monies. But of course, if you're one of 7 billion people and you don't have a brokerage account with a big bulge bracket Wall Street firm, you can't just buy the S&P 500 index and try to custody $10 million of the S&P index on an Android phone in Africa on Saturday, right? You can't custody it. And that means you can't trust your counterparties. So what we're going to see is a steady nonstop stream of monetary energy trickling from the weak monies and the weak assets to the strong assets. And Bitcoin just happens to be the strongest asset class in the world. But it's a lot better understood when your bank freezes and they seize all your money and you're about to become bankrupt and or impoverished. Then it's easy to understand. It's harder to understand if you're a blue blood limousine, trust fund baby living in upper East Side, and you've got a portfolio of NASDAQ or S&P stocks, and then you think it's just an oddity. What you're seeing is Bitcoin is emerging as the winner, and people realize it's the low risk network. When all your banks fail, when all your other cryptos get shut down, if it turns out that your cryptocurrency is regulated, if your crypto security is regulated, if your crypto network is regulated, Bitcoin is going to be the last network operating. And so people are starting to renew their interest in Bitcoin. A lot of capital is migrating into the Bitcoin network. The combination of SegWit and Taproot laid the foundation for people to build more intricate and more interesting applications on the Bitcoin network. But for a number of years, the developer community was focused upon all the other cryptos, and that's because they could issue tokens in order to finance their development. And so it was a fast money, easy money shortcut, and they were being boosted by the FTXs of the world, because FTX had infinite money. Now I think people are starting to ask the question, what's the ethically sound, technically sound, economically sound path forward? Okay. And that's a slower path. It took Lightning, for example, many, many years to gestate and get to the point where people are starting to build material applications on it, because Lightning was supported by venture capital in a conventional fashion. There was never a Lightning token issued that could be wash traded by FTX in order to pump it to the moon. With regard to ordinals and inscriptions, I think people are starting to ask the question, in addition to moving money on the network, what else can I do on a crypto network if what I wanted was to burn a transaction that is immutable, share it on a ledger to the entire world, and know that it will last forever. What Bitcoin represents is it represents the most powerful cyber network, or the most powerful computer network in the world. If I gave you $100 billion and control of a nation state, and I gave you 4 years and said attack the Bitcoin network, You could try to buy up all the SHA-256 mining rigs in the world and then try to power them up. And if you succeeded after 4 years, you might be able to slow the network down, but you couldn't stop it, right? So it's very difficult to either stop the network, to undermine the network, and or to block a message. What's the killer app? Well, an obvious killer app is for me to send $1 billion from me to you and know that no nation state can block it. But the next set of applications are to embed any file or any message. If I just wanted to send a message worth $1 billion, right? Like there are messages worth $1 billion that aren't the money, but they're the message, right? The example I used the other day is, what if I just burned my will on, and encrypted and inscribed my will onto Bitcoin, right? And it was going to convey $1 billion from one person to the other. That's a pretty valuable document, and you probably wouldn't want it to be tampered with by your law firm or by a nation state or by a corporation. So the ordinals and the inscriptions, they created a burst of activity, and they created a bubble in transaction fees. I mean, transaction fees went all the way up to be equal to the entire block reward for a while this weekend. And now they're cooling off a bit. But I think, we had a period when you could do transactions for 1, 2, 3 sats per V byte. I don't think we're going to see those days again. I think we're going to actually see transaction fees that are 10x, 100x that. And then I think over time, you're going to see an avalanche of applications that will be built where the application needs to cryptographically sign and certify a piece of data that you want to last for all eternity. Everything in the ecosystem is less secure than Bitcoin. It's like I've got the car on the street that's most secure. It's alarmed and it's locked, and everybody knows that's the hard one. They're going to steal every other car first. So you would be better off to short Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, every government on earth and every bank, because those will all be easier to hack first with any computer power. The Bitcoin mining rig is 2,000 times more efficient and more powerful than the most powerful CPU that Amazon AWS will rent you by the hour. So when it comes time to attack computer networks, people are going to attack the Amazon network before they're going to attack the Bitcoin network. It's 2,000 times cheaper to do it. And Bitcoin is the strongest money that humanity has. Bitcoin's going to coexist with Apple stock and Google stock and Facebook stock and the S&P index and the ARK ETF and bond funds, right? And commercial real estate. All of these things are out there. I believe they're all weaker forms of property. Right. And at the same time, as long as there is an Apple corporation, there will be Apple stock. As long as there is a United States of America, there will be the US dollar. As long as China exists, there'll be the CNY. So nation states will issue their currencies. The weak nation states that collapse may adopt the dollar or the euro or some other currency because their own currency collapsed. But in a world of nation states, we'll have fiat currencies. In a world of corporations, we'll have securities issued by the corporations. In a world of municipalities, we'll have debt issued by debtors. In a world where people live in houses and they work in buildings, we'll have real estate. Those asset classes won't go away, but Bitcoin will go from being 0.1% of that financial universe to being 1%, to being 2%, to being 10%. In a perfect world, David, Bitcoin would be like 50% of all financial asset.